If there's a creature that everyone thinks they know but almost no one truly understands, it's this one. Many people look at the woolly mammoth, Mammoths primigenius, and see just an elephant that forgot to visit the barber. But the reality is a masterpiece of biological engineering, focused on surviving where almost nothing else could stay standing. Forget the idea of a slow and clumsy primitive ancestor. What we have here is one of the most refined survival machines evolution has ever placed on Earth, living in a connection so deep with our own history that it almost lived to see the modern world.
To start understanding the mammoth, we need to adjust our scale. It wasn't a 10-meter-tall monster as the movies suggest. Adult males typically stood between 2.6 and 3.4 meters tall at the shoulder, weighing up to 8 tons. It is basically the size of a modern African elephant, but with a body density and thermal insulation from another planet. Its family tree is also surprising. It's not the father of today's elephants, but rather a sister group of the Asian elephant. They shared a common ancestor in Africa about 6 million years ago, but the mammoth was the cousin who decided to move north and specialize in the extreme cold of Siberia about 800,000 years ago. To avoid turning into a giant biological popsicle, this animal underwent a heavy biological upgrade. It possessed a specific gene that allowed it to tolerate the cold without discomfort, accumulate fat aggressively, and grow that iconic long fur, which could reach 1 meter in length to protect against the freezing wind and moisture. But the master secret was hidden in its blood. Do you know the biggest drama of living in the ice? In extreme cold, normal blood becomes sticky and refuses to release oxygen to the tissues. It's like a delivery man who arrives at your door but is so cold he refuses to get out of the car to give you the package. The mammoth solved this with a genius biological modification. Its blood had a sort of priority pass that forced the delivery of oxygen even to paws and trunks that were nearly frozen. This prevented its limbs from dying of cold and saved an absurd amount of energy because it didn't need to spend heat trying to warm its extremities all the time. To complete the package, its ears were small to minimize heat loss, and its skin had specialized glands that produced a natural oil, sebum, that waterproofed its fur and didn't let moisture reach the skin.
The setting where this animal lived wasn't a snowy, empty void, but the Mammoth Steppe, the most extensive terrestrial biome in the world during the glacial era. Picture a gigantic and highly productive grassland stretching from Europe all the way to North America, supported by a soil called Yedoma, which was rich in nutrients and ice. To dominate this terrain, the mammoth carried monumental tools, its tusks. These ivory defenses could reach an incredible 4 meters in length, with a much more pronounced curvature than those of modern elephants. They weren't just for show. During the harsh winters, the mammoth used these tusks like actual plows, sweeping away heavy snow and digging into the frozen ground to reach the grasses and herbs hidden underneath. This plowing behavior was what kept the entire ecosystem running. By consuming tons of vegetation, it returned nutrients to the soil through its droppings, fertilizing the grassland and preventing forests from encroaching on the open plains. Its ecological role was so vital that it functioned as a natural climate regulator. By stomping down deep snow and digging with its tusks, it removed the thermal insulation that prevented the cold from reaching the ground. Without this snow blanket, the cold penetrated directly into the soil, keeping the permafrost stable and preventing billions of tons of greenhouse gases from escaping into the atmosphere. Alongside wild horses and steppe bison, the mammoth ensured the planet remained colder and more reflective. It was an era of extreme hardship, where survival depended on this constant cycle of heavy work with the tusks and the renewal of the land. All this raw power and ability to transform the landscape didn't go unnoticed. attracting the attention of other residents of that time who learned to follow in the footsteps of these giants. Our relationship with the woolly mammoth was the foundation of human survival during the Upper Paleolithic. It was the most famous creature of that time for one simple reason: pure survival. The mammoth was the backbone of a true mammoth economy, providing high-calorie meat and fat, thick hide for clothing, and ivory to manufacture the most advanced tools and art of the era. Humans were so connected to them that our settlements were often planned to intercept their migratory routes, which could span over 1,000 kilometers, as proved by studies on the famous female mammoth, Elma. Human ingenuity with what was left of these animals was truly on another level. In regions like Ukraine and Russia, where wood was extremely scarce, we built monumental dwellings with hundreds of mammoth bones, such as the Mizhirich site, which featured circular huts made of interlocking jaws and skulls. Science is now working with the smokehouse hypothesis, suggesting these constructions weren't just homes, but large-scale meat processing centers, where slow-burning fires were used to cold smoke and stockpile food for long periods of winter scarcity. And this connection wasn't just utilitarian, it was deeply spiritual. In the Rouffignac cave in France, 70% of the cave art is dedicated to the mammoth. Artists used the natural curvature of the stone walls to give movement to the drawings, showing a profound technical knowledge of the anatomy of these colossal neighbors. The mammoth moved human life in those extreme conditions. But even all of this partnership wasn't enough to save the species when the rules of the world began to change. The story of the mammoth ends with a chronological twist that truly blows our minds. While ancient Egypt was at its peak, building the Great Pyramids of Giza around 2500 BC, woolly mammoths were still alive and healthy on Wrangel Island north of Siberia. They were isolated there when sea levels rose and survived until about 1650 BC. This means that for over 800 years, the pyramids and the last survivors of the Ice Age shared the same time on the planet. Their eventual end on Wrangel Island was caused by an extreme genetic bottleneck. The population started with only 8 individuals, which led to a massive loss of diversity and the accumulation of harmful mutations in a process scientists called drift debt. Today, interest in the mammoth goes far beyond fossils and museums. De-extinction projects aim to use gene editing technologies to insert mammoth characteristics into Asian elephants, focusing on cold resistance and fat storage. The idea isn't just to bring back an icon out of curiosity, but to reactivate the mammoth steppe as a massive ecological barrier against the melting permafrost. It's science trying to use a giant from the past to fix the environmental problems of the present and ensure our climate's stability. And you? Do you think this idea of resurrecting mammoth functions is the right path to save our climate? Or should this biological puzzle stay in the past? Leave your opinion below. I want to know what you think about this return of the giants. If you enjoy science taken seriously but with straight talk and no fluff, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thanks, and see you next time.